Hello, everybody. We are so excited to welcome you to Walk the Talk. Just a conversation between two parents, first and foremost, and two parent coaches who deal with children from all ages. And we just thought that by having conversations about real issues that all of us tend to face at some point or another, we can actually instill value. We might be able to help you with a few tips and strategies and things that you can take away from this conversation that could actually make a meaningful difference in your relationship with your children. And sometimes that just starts with understanding what is going on, what is happening inside their minds. Why are we seeing what we are seeing? Because years ago, there wasn't enough knowledge to really fully understand what is happening in front of your eyes. You're just trying to raise a decent human being, but you didn't have all the background information or the in-depth knowledge to do that properly. But now we are definitely smarter, wiser, and more equipped to do a great job. So I'm Marelise Culbert, and I am so happy that I can have this conversation with Isla Reddin. And we are both parenting coaches. Isla is the teen genius extraordinaire. She knows everything that you need to know about teenagers. And she has cracked the teen code, which is also the name of her website. And I deal preferably with younger children because I know that in everything I've learned and everything that I've come to understand and have been able to implement, I've seen how you set them up in the younger years can also lead to much greater results later on. But there are amazing connections between all the ages, and that's what we are going to explore today. So Isla, I'm going to give it over to you. Thank you so much for that we are able to do this. It really is wonderful to learn from you. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Marelise. I'm equally thrilled to be here. This is the beginning of a conversation that we want to be having on a regular basis with you, with other parents. And as Marelise said, my area of passion is really in the teenage years, because that's where I had the biggest challenges with very, very little support. And I have learned so much since my kids were teenagers that I now want to share that. So Marelise and I decided that we would start today talking about the brain, because it is actually the single biggest difference, the difference that makes the difference between in our children, this evolution that they have to go through from 0 to 18, 20, 25. And what we're not prepared for is the fact that everything changes in the teenage years. We know it changes because we feel it. It's happening in our homes. We're looking at our children and going, what invasive species just landed here? But we don't know where that came from. The beauty of the research that's now available to us is we do know that now. So what we understand is all of the development that was happening 0 to 5 or 0 to 6 was all about like the computer with no software yet, and all of the data was being downloaded and downloaded and downloaded, but there's no filtering, there's no decision made on the part of the child. I'm going to take this piece of information and I don't want that piece of information. But all of that at some point has to get kind of groomed into a brain that is super efficient to become an adult. And that's what's happening in the teenage years. We are moving from a child that we have raised, that we've learned, trial, error, pain, everything to parent. And we think we've generally done a reasonably good job. At least we've learned something. And then we get to 11, 12, 13, and we realize we learned nothing. So well,
it feels that way. It just feels that way. So be encouraged. It's not true. We've all learned a lot. We're all being shaped in the process. But yes, the change is immense.
Yeah. And so the change is really, it's the same speed of change, if you like, that happens in 0 to 5. And it's then happening again. And what is actually happening is, because the brain is becoming more efficient and more capable of being is working toward the adult years and is in that process, it actually goes through a mechanism that's called pruning. It's like all of the branches of a tree. And this tree is huge with multiple branches and leaves, and it has to become more efficient. And it's a pruning process. But that in that process, the child is becoming an adult, and it requires a very different set of parenting skills than the ones that worked before. And it's learning with our kids how to support that change that becomes the goal of parenting in the teenage years.
That is so true. And just briefly, that is why I also learned the value of what happens before the teenage years, because when I actually married and got 3 bonus children before I had biological children. So the eldest was 15 years old. And to walk into that world without any understanding of what went before and why on earth am I seeing this, and there's just actually no point where you can relate. It's so scary, and it's a reality for so many parents. And because of what I learned there as well, my mission was to build in from the youngest possible age all into those that came after, to see what a difference that can make if you have the privilege of building it in right from the start. But then also, after speaking to you, Isla, I understood in the brain development and all the different things that take place, because you do feel, you get to 12 and you feel like, oh my gosh, did I just birth another child again, or what's going on? Because everything that I knew before is changing before my eyes. And I know what I put in. I know to what extent I slaved to avoid this. But then, of course, if you understand, okay, this is normal. It's not because of something I overlooked or didn't do right. It's not because there's something wrong with my child. It really is a whole different ball game. So I'm so glad that you can lead us through it, because I think every parent needs to hear what you can teach them on that front. It really is. It's a life-changing time in anyone's life.
Yeah. And I think, my goal with what I learned, and as I said, I did not learn it when my kids were teenagers. I kind of went back to school after that. I knew at the time, my intuition was, people were telling me it's normal, it's hormones, it's, they just risky behaviors, all of this. And my intuition was, that's not possible. There's more. But we didn't have the data. I mean, maybe it was out there, but I didn't have access to it for sure until later. But the part that I really want parents to understand is that they're not damaged, their kids aren't damaged, they're not a bad parent. Everything is normal. We may not like the normal because we don't understand it, and we need to learn it, and we need to be able to figure out and be willing to work with it. But everybody is still progressing the way they're supposed to. Nature is doing its job, even when it feels so challenging. And that's the message I want parents to have is, you're doing a beautiful job. If we can add this component to it, you'll feel so much more confident and competent, and you'll be able to really support your child in a way that you haven't been able to before, because you don't know. Nobody ever told us.
Exactly. I honestly don't think it was common knowledge at all, because even back then, when I was trying to learn take crash courses, because the situation was in front of me, I walked into it. It's not that like there was any time to prepare. But this information was definitely not available where I was. So I just think it's so valuable to be able to just say, don't worry, it's not you, it's normal. And then to understand, well, what happens inside the brain that this could possibly be normal. And this is why I'm so grateful that you can talk to us about that, because you understand that process. And to even just be able to say to a parent, it's not because of something you haven't done. You might want to incorporate these 2 things on a daily basis that could help you, or maybe just go and look at this and that to know, is it really a problem, or is it just part of the stage? And so I don't know, Isla, maybe if you want to give us like 2 or 3 pointers of things that you look at or things that you use to gauge whether this situation is in fact normal or whether there's something else missing, or just something that parents could take away and try and build into whatever it is that they are doing at home.
I think that's a great question, because we also are concerned about the mental health or the mental distress that's going on as well with our teenagers. So how to be able to determine, is this something that is normal behavior that we're seeing, and is it something that just by me, the parent, walking alongside my child, we can figure this out together? Or is there more that I really need to be concerned about and seek professional help for it? And I think that the more we as parents understand what is normal, then the better equipped we are to be able to determine, is this something that that I can help my child with, or is it something that I need more help with? And I think that what I learned and what I see with the parents that I'm working with is that if we're able to come from that place of, I understand what normal development is in the adolescent brain, I understand that this aspect of what's happening from childhood to adulthood, and the brain does not completely finish developing until about 25. That understanding that it's developing from the back forward, so the pieces that are missing, so to speak, are those pieces that we totally expect our kids to be able to have. Like, why don't they understand the consequences of that behavior?
Exactly.
Or why are they not able to make good decisions? What are they thinking? I mean, literally, what are they thinking? And I think that when you understand that is a process and you're aware of that, then as a parent, you're so much more capable of saying, well, that is normal. It may be something that I'm not happy about, but it's normal as part of the process, versus there's something more going on here and we need to take care of it.
Yeah, and that is so important to know, because just when I discovered this whole thing about the brain only being fully developed by the age of 25, around there, I was like, what is society thinking? How can you give them liquor licenses and marriage licenses and all these things before 25 then? Because no wonder, the world is in the state that it's in. And just knowing that, even if it doesn't change things, just knowing that settled my heart. It's like, okay. And also it settled my heart about myself, because I think back to things that I did at 20 and 23 maybe, and I'm like, oh my gosh, how could I have done that? And so it's important to know that. And when you look, so because I tried to avoid just that, because I didn't want to repeat that in the younger children, because I didn't understand that that was normal, I put a lot of emphasis on the earlier years to try and instill everything that I thought would help them prevent that. When in fact, I eventually learned, okay, you can't do that. That is actually normal. But yes, what you build in the earlier years does have an effect on the teenage years. All is not lost, because there were certain things that I was able to build into my child in terms of his understanding of who he is and where he fits into the world, that definitely helped him to not succumb to the same pressures as his peers in most instances, not everywhere, because it's all a learning curve. But I do believe that, as with anything, prevention is better than cure. So if you can build in things that give them a good foundation to build on, that doesn't mean they're going to never make mistakes. They're just going to be able to deal with the challenges a little bit better. And that is where I think it is important through all the stages to still do as much as you possibly can. Just know that when you see a reaction that floors you, it's not because you've done something wrong, and it's not because there's something wrong with the child. There's got to be enough grace and understanding and love to allow them to just be in every moment as well. because you have built in the good stuff. So that's also got to come out somewhere, right?
I think that, to your point, the part that when you consciously have, if you know where you're going, if you know that this massive upheaval and change is normal and is the preparation for adulthood, and you've built in that connection with your child, that it's really your ability to understand more of who your child is, and for them to be able to express what they're learning about themselves to you. So that identity piece, when that connection is strong, I think it really helps things not get really difficult and torn apart.
Totally unravel. I agree with you, and that is really the focus of everything that I do, because I feel that that was a big thing that was missing when we grew up. These were the standard house rules. Everyone had to obey this way. Everyone was punished the same way. Everyone, it was like standard rules. There was no, I don't want to say, because that's not true. My parents had understanding for each of us, and what made us different, etc. So there was a foundation of that, but there are so many things about every child in front of you that makes them unique, that makes them the wonderful miracles that they are. And the sooner you start to just appreciate that about them and help them discover more of that, and not have to fit into a particular mold, and that's how it is, and end of story, but to actually acknowledge the person in front of you. And that is something that I feel we all could have learned more about, is to not criticize at a young age, because and we do that as parents because we are overwhelmed. We have got so much on our plate. The world, it just seems like the overwhelm doesn't stop, and depending on your situation and the trauma you might have been through and whatever it is that you need to do, it's not like 50 years ago when mommy could stay at home, daddy went to go work, and you could just devote all your time and love and energy to the children and the family and the space. We don't have that luxury. Most of us don't have that anymore. So when the overwhelm is mounting, and you find yourself under increasing pressure to just keep everybody afloat, it's difficult to take the time and say, I'm going to give you 10 minutes. Tell me, how do you feel? What do you think about this? Oh, you want to try 20 different ways? Okay, sure. I have all the time in the world. Let's do it. 20 different. We don't have that luxury anymore. And yet that is obviously, that would be amazing. And that is probably what they would respond to best. But that's not the reality. So to some way find the balance between being curious and open and individualized enough to help them grow into whatever it is that makes them unique, and then also have the family space where everyone is allowed the same benefits. That's not easy.
No. And for another conversation, Marelise, but
Yes.
this stress that our parents are under is
It's real.
so huge,
Yes.
and our kids feel it inevitably as our parents feel the kids' stress. So another conversation, definitely, but just to open up this aspect of our lives today, so that we can explore we can have, instead of having a perception that everything is happening to us, that we maybe can pull back some power for ourselves to say, I'm going to choose how I want to respond. I'm going to learn to give myself a pause, or I'm going to learn that when something happens, I'm not going to react, because I've got to manage my own well-being. I've got to be safe to myself. And I think there's a huge aspect of the parenting challenge that is just the stress of being a parent with life.
Yes.
Trying to stay afloat.
And what makes that even more important, because of course if you don't have that clear sense of identity and reality and everything that is important, our children model from the beginning. They model what they see. So then it's more difficult to say, well, you know, you should actually be doing this and that. Because my son, I did try and make this clear right from the start. And I said to him, but so this is how you do it. But if you don't see me doing that, tell me, because sometimes I don't realize, you know, that what I'm doing is not what I've told you. And so he did. He felt very free to tell me exactly when I wasn't living up to the rule or the standard or whatever. And that's actually a wonderful space to try and maintain throughout, because he knows there's nothing off limits. There's nothing that we can't discuss. And that my primary goal is to help him really be him. And so we've got to keep those channels open. So as if you can try and instill that from a very early age, and try and maintain that by never actually blocking it off and saying, okay, we're not talking about this, or, you know, saying, okay, you can't go there. Because I think it is really important for them to also settle in their minds what is good, what is not good, and if not, why. Just to understand, because I do think the more we understand, the more we are able to deal with and cope with and actually make better decisions. So yes, we're going to have lots of conversations. I love talking to you because it's so important for us to say these things out loud so that people can know they're not alone. It is actually normal, and yes, there is hope, and there are lots of better ways to do almost everything. So let's learn from one another. Yeah.
Yes, and there are resources out there. You know,
yes.
there are people and programs and there are books and there are videos. There are resources. There's a challenge for all of us of how much time we have, but at the same time, there's help. Nobody should feel like they're doing this alone. I think that's our biggest message. Is you are not alone here.
Never.
Yeah. So
yes.
okay.
Thank you, Isla.
Can we close this conversation today?
Yes. And if there are any questions, please feel free to send Isla or myself a message, and or you can just put a comment in the chat below, because it's going to be on both our platforms, and then we can try and get back to you with something of value to you. So please ask the questions, because next time we want to answer them.
Yeah. Yes. And your question is going to be another mom's question or another parent's question as well. There's no bad questions. The questions are really, really important, because they give us the opportunity for us all to bring things out into the open and talk about them. So, yeah. Thank you, Marelise.
It was so amazing. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.